Let us pray. We, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our considerations. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports. Introduction of special guests.
I think we're still back on tablings. Thank you, the Minister of Advanced Education.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to file with the Assembly written answers to questions taken as notice by members of Executive Council during your estimates.
Provincial Treasurer.
Mr. Speaker, I would want to file answers to written questions and motions for return.
Okay.
Introduction of special guests.
Member for Drumheller.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure this morning to introduce to you and through you to all members of the Assembly two distinguished residents of the Northwest Territories. They are David Hamilton and his wife Kate. Mr. Hamilton is clerk of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories. And in particular, I'm also happy to welcome to our midst this morning Mr. Hamilton's parents, Malcolm and Kathleen Hamilton, who come from the same place in Scotland that my wife's grandfather comes from. That's Blairgowrie, Scotland. I ask them all to rise and receive the traditional warm welcome of this Assembly.
Member for Red Deer North.
Speaker, I'm honored to introduce a constituent of Red Deer North. Mr. Harlan Hulliman is with us this morning. Mr. Hulliman dedicates himself to the preservation of our historical heritage in the province and in Red Deer North. He serves on the Board of Directors of Access and on a number of historical projects in our city. I'd ask Mr. Hulliman to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House this morning.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Well, that's nice, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the most striking things Albertan will remember about this first session of the 22nd legislature is this government's steadfast refusal to level with Albertans about its financial dealings with one Peter Pocklington. Mr. Speaker, of course, using Alberta's taxpayers' dollars. Only by persistent questioning has the official opposition been able to pry the door open on this government's tangled financial dealings.
Right.
Now, Mr. Speaker, we have something new. The saga continues, Mr. Speaker. On August 11th, a new $5 million demand debenture from Gainers Properties Incorporated, payable to Lloyd's Bank of Canada, have listened to this interest rate, Mr. Speaker, 25% interest, 11.5 points above prime, was signed by one Peter Pocklington. My question to the Treasurer, in view of the fact, Mr. Speaker, that Mr. Pocklington is into this government for some $67 million, was the government aware of this latest loan, and did they agree to it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we don't keep track of the day-to-day transactions between corporations. If I hear the member's question accurately, there's no reference to the government being involved in that transaction.
Mr. Speaker, The government is in up to their eyeballs in this transaction
That's right.
because simply, Mr. Speaker, I'll ask the Minister this, and is he aware that the securities pledged on this new debenture are substantially the same assets that were pledged to the government's numbered company? Is he not aware of this? And if he isn't, why would he allow this to happen if he's aware of it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member has some view that the government is managing the corporation. Corporations do all kinds of arrangements with the bankers to maintain their position. I notice, Mr. Speaker, I hate to say it, but in checking the newspapers, I see that Gaynord is rehiring. The information in the newspapers is that the hog demand is up. Mr. Speaker, it seems to me these are the normal kinds of corporate reorganizations that corporations do. And unless the member wants to be specific about the government's role, we have no view as to what the corporation does in terms of its own organization, in terms of securing its position, or in terms of doing a deal with its banking authorities, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah,
Mr. Speaker, is the minister not aware that when this company is using the same assets as they're giving to the government, there has to be implications for this government, Mr.
Right.
Speaker? And when a private bank, Mr. Speaker, the question of the Treasurer, when a private bank is charging a ridiculous 25% interest rate, something is awry, Mr. Speaker. And my question to the Treasurer, with this interest rate, they're suggesting this company is a bad credit risk. How can this Treasurer stand up day in and day out and say that Alberta taxpayers are adequately protected?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what I can say is what I've said consistently over the last 3 or 4 months that this question has been put to various members of the government, that we have put in place our security against the fixed assets. We have a second pledge in some cases against the inventories and receivables. We have a second position against other buildings across Canada. In particular, the one I've talked about is the bacon plant in Saskatchewan. And we have taken full protection of the guarantee that we provided to a bank, a financial institution. And there's been no defaults in the payment, and the next major payments take place in October of 1989, when the $6 million loan advanced from economic development portfolio, which has been fully revealed and discussed over the past 2 years, the first payment on interest starts on next fall. So, Mr. Speaker, we're in that period where all we do is monitor the financial statements of the entity and wait to see if we have any other problems with respect to that corporation. It will be in the fall, and that's the only point we can look at. What I should note, though, Mr. Speaker, is while the member is doing a lot of fishing here, in fact, both parties have been fishing over the past, I guess, 2 or 3 months, what it has done is certainly caused anxiety in the minds of the employees of those plants. Every time a question is raised, there's phone calls to us, phone calls to the corporate head offices, suggesting that something is wrong with the entity. Now, if these people really want to protect the interests of the employees, they would get their facts right before they start this seditious rumors about what's happening in that plant, Mr. Speaker.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, if this Treasurer would be forthcoming and tell the truth and not get into these things.
Here, here, there wouldn't be a problem.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to designate my second question to the member from Calgary Mountain View.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have 5 copies to file of a memo dated August the 9th, 1989, from Mr. J.C. Major, who was the government's lawyer at the Code Inquiry, and is addressed to the member for Three Hills. Mr. Speaker, this memo attempts to discredit Mr. Code and to begin a campaign to rehabilitate the member's conduct as a former Minister for Consumer and Corporate Affairs. However, this shallow, superficial, and probably expensive legal opinion chooses to ignore the direction which was given to Mr. Code by the Court of Appeal of Alberta that, quote, said, nonetheless, he, Mr. Code, must be able to report to the court in a comprehensive fashion facts found by him, unquote. To the Premier, why was Mr. Major paid at public expense to rehabilitate the career of a failed Tory cabinet minister who the Premier himself had already fired by the time the memo was delivered?
He wasn't, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, he was.
Well, Mr. Major indicates
said
that
he
he was. Mr. Speaker, given the mischievous nature of this memo to attack the very basis for the Premier's decision to fire the former minister, does he repudiate the conclusions of this government commission memo and still stand by his decision that inasmuch as a member had failed in her ministerial responsibility, she had to step down from cabinet?
Mr. Speaker, there's nothing mischievous about the memo.
Mr. Speaker, given the Premier's
Mr. Major
promise
said
to
he
the
paid
people of
for it.
Alberta and to this Assembly on July the 28th that they'd follow every legal avenue to aggressively prosecute wrongdoing in the principal fiasco, can he explain to this Assembly why his government is squandering time and public money on legal opinions to fight internal squabbles in the Tory caucus and is doing nothing about getting on with the real job that matters to Albertans, and that job being to prosecute wrongdoing in the principal fiasco?
We aren't, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member, I know, is frustrated because the people of Alberta have so strongly accepted the government's position on the principal matter. Now, I know the opposition don't like that, but we have been able to deal with a difficult matter, yes. And as I said in my response, it was a difficult matter, created in many ways from times past when many people in this legislature were not present. Regardless of that, when there are tough decisions to be made on tough matters, we're prepared to take them and to do the right and fair and reasonable thing. That's what we've done, and that's what the people of Alberta support, and it's too bad the honourable member just doesn't like it. That's tough. Hear, hear.
Member for Edmonton Glengarry. Edmonton Glengarry, followed by Bow Valley, then Edmonton Avonmore.
Mr. Speaker, time and time again, the Premier and the Treasurer have not given this House further information with respect to questions that have been put to them that relate to the principal group fiasco. Both have responded by saying that the comprehensive code report speaks for itself. My first question is to the Premier. Given that the Premier and others have received the memo that's been referred to, does the Premier accept one of the conclusions in that memo that Mr. Code was irresponsible and unfair in his treatment of the former Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs?
Mr. Speaker, the memo speaks for itself. I should say to the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, if he has trouble getting answers, it's not our fault if he prepares sloppy questions. Exactly. I mean, after all, maybe one of these days the stars will be aligned in some way that we can expect a good question. It's getting short, though, Mr. Speaker. Let's hope there's some magic in the stars.
Mr. Speaker, this isn't a joke. Albertans want answers from you, Mr. Premier. Mr. Premier, given that the Premier has previously acknowledged Mr. Code's legal ability, presumably to determine facts and make legal conclusions, will the Premier declare here today that another conclusion of Mr. Major in that memo, namely that Mr. Code has no training, no experience, and lacked an ability to determine the public good, is incorrect and wrong?
Mr. Speaker, I've said that Mr. Code is a fine lawyer. I understand he's a member of the Liberal Party even. Now, that leaves some basis for questioning his judgment, but other than that, though, Mr. Speaker, I think he's conducted himself well.
Good, George.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier has completely done a flip-flop and trivialized this whole code matter, a matter that has cost Albertans $100 million. Premier, I want to ask you this. Are you prepared to disassociate yourself from that memo that Mr. Major has circulated to you and every other member of your government?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we listened with great anticipation for the final opportunity, perhaps, that the member might have been able to get a question out that could have been effective with the stars in the right alignment. He hasn't, and it's a shame.
Member for Bow Valley. Bow Valley. Give it to him.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question to the Acting Minister of Career Development and Employment. Mr. Speaker, recent statistics provided by Stats Canada shows that there's been more young people employed in Alberta than was ever on record. Now, this was good news to the youth of Alberta, but my question to the Minister is, was this a general rule in all of Alberta, or were there just certain selected parts that had this positive news?
Mr. Speaker, a few days ago, Statistics Canada released the monthly unemployment figures for the various jurisdictions across country Canada, and at that time indicated in the province of Alberta we were now experiencing the largest employment level for our youth ever in the history of this province, with some 127,000 young people in our province employed in the month of July. I would anticipate that when the figures come out in September for the month of August, that the same will hold true. Very specifically, that sustained aspect of employment is being experienced by our young people throughout the province of Alberta and all corners of the province of Alberta, and of course we all know the reason why, and it has to do with the economic diversification initiatives of this government. But there is a concern, though, in those statistics, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps this is probably the most opportune time of the year in which to raise them. Statistics Canada keeps its figures on the basis of ages 15 to 24 and then breaks them down further to two groupings, young people from 15 to 19 and young people from 20 to 24. And the unemployment rate in the 15 to 19 category is substantially higher than the unemployment rate in the 20 to 24 age grouping. So if our young people now in all parts of Alberta are asking themselves the question, is it worthy of me continuing my education? Should I go back to high school and finish my grade 12, or should I go to one of the technical schools, the universities? The answer very clearly is our young people should be in school and should take advantage of the finest educational system in the world in this province and should continue their education.
Mr. Speaker, fairly soon a lot of the students will be returning to school, and presumably these jobs will be left open. Now, does the minister feel that this will provide employment to the ones in our society that are now unemployed?
I don't think there's any doubt at all about that, Mr. Speaker. If we have 127,000 young people, of course not all of them will be going back to school to continue their education. There will be a fair number of these jobs which will now become open. And those individuals, perhaps at an older age grouping who may be looking for employment, I think that they'll find that their employment opportunities will increase pretty substantially in the next couple of months as a result of that. Best projections we have through the fall and through the winter of this year, Mr. Speaker, is that we have a strong basis now for continued strength in employment in this province, and the figures of employment should remain fairly constant through to the spring of 1990. And of course, then when we get back to nice and warm weather, they'll in fact even improve even that much more dramatically as a result of the kick-in of a lot of these major job creation programs that are currently underway in our province.
Last supplementary, Mr. Speaker. About this time of the year, the minister generally announces the priority employment program, and there's some concern that with the job opportunities that there are nowadays, that the minister will scrap the PEP program. I'm wondering if the PEP program will carry on this year, or will it be scrapped?
Mr. Speaker, in the estimates put forward by the Minister of Career Development and Employment, there were dollars carried in the budget for 1989-90 for the Priority Employment Program. While we do have tremendous strength in employment in our province, of course, we also recognize that there are some individuals in our province that still must continue to seek employment opportunities. It will not be the intent of the government to scrap the Priority Employment Program for 1989. I think realistically, however, we have to recognize that the Priority Employment Program was set up to assist the unemployed in our province. That's part of the caring responsibility mandate of this government. And we would, within the next month, Mr. Speaker, be in a position to announce the continuance of the Priority Economic Program for the fall of 1989, the spring of 1990. but I think everyone should have to recognize that the demands and the need for as large a program that we've had in previous years will simply not be there. And it goes hand in hand with the other objective that we have. Instead of simply being in the business of creating part-time jobs, we want to refocus substantial amounts of those dollars into creative training programs for long-term positions that will be a benefit to the individuals affected.
Thank you. Edmonton Avonmore, Edmonton Meadowlark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are to the Attorney General. The report of the Crimes Compensation Board released yesterday indicates a decision in which a woman was held 25% responsible for the injuries suffered at the hands of her ex-boyfriend. The message, Mr. Speaker, being sent to women is that they must be wary of men, and that if they are beaten up, it is somehow their fault. In view of this ruling, which holds women responsible for the violence against them, will the minister now review the composition of the board?
Mr. Speaker, in no way does this government or this minister condone violence, whether it's in the family or outside of the family. The Crimes Compensation Board is a board that's set up to administer the Act, which adjudicates on compensation to victims that occur from a crime. It's not an adjudication on the crime itself. That happens in another forum, which is usually in one of the courts of the province. But it is a time when a person can come forward and put their case for compensation. In this instance, that did happen. The Act does say that all facts are to be taken into consideration, and in this situation, that is what occurred.
Mr. Speaker, is the minister then saying that persons known to have bad tempers can be excused from taking full responsibility for their behavior and actions and the injuries they cause?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not to debate a judgment that has been handed down by another board who had the facts of a particular case before them. I will repeat that the government does not condone violence. In fact, my honourable colleague, the Solicitor General, just the other day advised the House that he would ask the police to participate more in helping victims of family violence. Another colleague, the Minister of Family and Social Services, was indicating other initiatives in terms of violence. We don't condone it. In this particular instance, it's a compensation matter for the crime. There was an adjudication based on the facts. I can't comment on those facts.
Mr. Speaker, I suggest that the decision was based more on bad attitudes. To the minister responsible for women's issues, in light of her statement yesterday that we, and I quote, "we are dealing with individual attitudes and there is only so much we can do," would this minister take action to ensure that people holding inappropriate attitudes are not appointed to serve on tribunals like the Crimes Compensation Board?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my role as minister responsible for women's issues is as an advocate and as a catalyst. I myself am not responsible for the appointments to these boards. However, I think the member has raised an excellent point. It's one we have to continue fighting against. And as we find examples of attitudes that are not acceptable toward women, we must continue to raise the issue and ensure that women are treated fairly and with all the dignity and respect that they are due. Now, on the specific matter that the member has raised, I, too, would prefer to see the full context of the case to understand fully the decision that the Crime Compensation Board came to, but I'm sure the Honourable Attorney General will be taking steps of that nature, and I'd be more than pleased to consult with him as he does.
Edmonton Meadowlark, followed by Clover Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, an independent study commissioned by the Government of Ontario has demonstrated that the environmental protection industry in that province, including recycling, protection technology, cleanup, is now a $2 billion a year industry. This study indicates that the industry, in fact, employs 28,000 people and has grown since 1983 at rates of between 17 and 32% per year. The study concluded that protecting the environment makes more than just good sense, it makes money. To the Minister of Economic Development, what are the Minister's estimates for the size of this industry in Alberta and his projections for the size of this industry in the future?
Mr. Speaker, maybe I can indicate to the honourable member that both the Minister of Environment and myself, plus our departmental officials, are working together to put together a proposal recognizing the economic benefits, as the honourable member has indicated, as it relates to the recycling industry. We are looking closely as to how we can offer direct or indirect support to this industry, recognizing there is significant spin-off benefits, plus it does play such a substantial role in the protection of the environment within the province.
I wonder whether the Minister could give us a more specific indication of when we will see initiatives from this Minister, from the Minister of Environment, to establish a recycled paper industry in this province by using government procurement policies to establish a market, and in fact by issuing a proposal call for a recycled paper plant in this province.
We are working with a couple of specific companies right now, Mr. Speaker, and because of the confidential nature of those workings, I hesitate to mention the companies involved, but I'm happy to leave the honourable member with the assurance that within a matter of weeks to months, we should have something specific, not only as it relates to the industry, but as it relates to some specific companies.
I wonder whether the Minister could give us some assurances as to whether or not he is considering the recycling of plastic industry as well, and what specific initiatives he will be announcing in that regard.
It's as I indicated to the honourable member, if he would be a wee bit patient with us, we are looking at both paper recycling, plastics recycling, and a general overview as to how we can be more protective of our environment, recognizing, though, Mr. Speaker, that within this province we have the highest environmental standards of just about anybody in the world.
Clover Bar, followed by Edmonton Belmont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to address my question to the Honourable Minister of Culture and Multiculturalism. Fringe is an excellent cultural tourism event that has grown and has somewhat taken on a life of its own. It's a celebration within the Strathcona community of Edmonton, and I'm somewhat surprised that the honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona has not addressed this issue in the House. Perhaps this matter is too good, too positive for the community to warrant the attention of the Socialist Party. Can the Minister deal with the impact of Fringe? And I'm speaking about an evaluation of the participation by the people in the performing arts, as well as the reception of this cultural panorama by the community.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sure the bad actors and the New Democrats will want to pay close attention here. This Fringe Festival is a great example of creativity. A gentleman, Brian Paisley, with an idea, some hard work of hundreds of volunteers, the involvement of the business community, the local neighborhood, and the honourable members' constituency of Edmonton Strathcona, the business community generally speaking, and a little help from the government to keep things percolating along. We've now got the 8th year of this festival that has grown from just an idea to the second largest alternate theater festival in the world that will this year perhaps attract upwards of 250,000 people, with performers from Alberta, Canada, across North America, from Ireland, from Australia, from the Soviet Union, and in actual fact, with the government support coming from the Alberta Foundation for the Performing Arts, in the order of $40,000. A prudent example of government involvement, $40,000 creates and helps spur an economic benefit that reaches well into 7 or 8 figures, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to deal with some of the quantitative impact, and to the Honourable Minister of Tourism. What is the economic impact of this Fringe Festival? And I'm asking about the financial benefit of Fringe and other festivals promoted through the Canada-Alberta Tourism Agreement.
I haven't got those figures right at my fingertips, Mr. Speaker, but undoubtedly It is a very strong impact, as the Minister has said. It is one of the best and biggest in North America. We were fortunate through the Canada-Alberta Tourism Agreement to fund the first ever study along with Fringe and the 6 other festivals in Edmonton, and that study is well underway, and they'll end up with a marketing plan so they can effectively use all of the festivals in conjunction with each other to make sure that Edmonton is the festival city that it claims to be.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Tourism again. What specific assistance of historical significance in line with the historical impact of Strathcona is Alberta providing to ensure that Fringe has that cultural and tourism benefit?
Mr. Speaker, this year...
Honourable Minister, just sit down for a while. Sit down for a while. Minister of Tourism.
Too much good news for the Democrats.
Mr. Speaker, along with the Central Railroad Company, the Canadian National, Canadian Pacific, and the Fringe, Alberta Tourism has been able to bring our engine 6060, which is leased to Central Railroad, as a new addition to the Fringe. And if you notice, there's new railroad being built there, a temporary railroad, so that Albertans can enjoy this new steam train that is a new tourist product that headquartered in Camrose, and I hope that Edmontonians will take the opportunity to go down to Camrose and ride on it. They'll be able to get a ride right here in Edmonton on the short 6 blocks of that track. Mr. Speaker, this is just 1 or 2 of the projects that we're doing. There's over 300 projects that have been funded in Canada, and in our Community Tourism Action Program, I'd like to tell you that 99% of all the communities, of the 375 communities in this province, are well underway in their planning process or completed. And they've already received funding of some $10 million, or projects worth $10 million through that program.
Edmonton Belmont.
Well, that was a 3-star performance, and it's a good thing they were all aligned. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister, or the Acting Minister of Career Development and Employment. Mr. Speaker, of the $1.5 billion that the federal Conservatives are slashing from the unemployment insurance benefits, less than half of that amount of money will go into training programs. And while 60,000 unemployed workers in Alberta stand to lose over $100 million, $38 million alone in Edmonton, this government has no guarantee that the proposed training funds will find their way to Alberta workers. The feds have cut $500 million from training programs over the last 4 years, and this government has cut $20 million from its training programs over the last 3 years. Mr. Speaker, in light of this clarification, will the minister now admit that there is no increase in the training funds? Thus, there will not be any offsetting effect for unemployed Albertans.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's simply not factually correct. This matter has been raised in the House before, and it has been reported that there will be ongoing discussions between the provinces of Canada with the federal minister responsible. The province of Alberta will have continuing discussions with the federal government with respect to this matter. What is extremely important, Mr. Speaker, that as Canada moves out of this century into the next century, we have to put in place a system that will allow people in this country to be adequately trained to meet the possibilities of the future. All too often in the past, there has been an ad hoc approach to unemployment programs when unemployment numbers may go up at a certain point in a certain part of the country, and not enough emphasis has been on the need to train people for the magnificent opportunities that will occur into the future. This province recognizes that, and one of the major initiatives of this government in recent years, of course, has been with respect to the area of economic diversification, balanced growth throughout this whole province of Alberta, lasting, permanent, high-quality jobs. People have to be trained, and the initiatives that we will be taking as a government in concert with the federal government will be to ensure that those dollars are present to provide training opportunities for the citizens of this province.
They do it on the backs of workers, Mr. Speaker, by cutting the training programs that were there before. And the minister doesn't like, quite frankly, the fact that we use the same statistics database that Stats Canada uses for the unemployment statistics. But, Mr. Speaker, just to the minister, will the minister do all that he can to try and get the federal minister of employment and immigration to release the results of the federal government's impact study and make that study public, so that when this traveling roadshow put on by the federal government comes to town, Albertans will be able to address the concerns and the impact that it's going to have in Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, several weeks ago, the honourable member stood in the House and basically talked about a federal government, Canadian House of Commons, all party committees, I understand, will be touring the country, members of the House of Commons who will be seeking views of citizens across this country. I don't believe that I would refer to such a group of esteemed leaders, elected leaders in our country, as a traveling roadshow. These individuals are searching for views of the citizens of Canada. They will search for the views of the people of Alberta. They will, I'm sure, take those inputs in the honourable way that an elected person, whether he be or she be in the Canadian House of Commons or the elected Assembly of the Province of Alberta, and will work hand in hand with that. Documents that pertain to the Government of Canada are the property of the Government of Canada. Documents that pertain to the Canadian House of Commons are the property of the Canadian House of Commons. Documents that pertain to any of the particular caucuses in Ottawa are the documents of those particular caucuses. If there is published information that the New Democratic Party has difficulty sending a letter to ask for a copy of, I would be very, very pleased to pen such a letter and do it on their behalf. But I would have to wonder why the New Democratic Party has nearly $1 million a year given to it to undertake such necessary research, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the truth of the matter is that the New Democrat official opposition was the only group that made an application to appear before the committee, and the government didn't even care enough to make an application to appear, and we were turned down by... The last question to perhaps somebody who can give us an answer, and that's the Minister of Family and Social Services. I said maybe. Mr. Speaker, given that the federal government has stipulated that the distribution of the worker training program is going to be directed to social...
Forgive me, honourable member, for a moment. Please stop the distribution of that during question period. Please continue, Edmonton Belmont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that the federal government has stipulated that the distribution of worker finance training money directed to those on social assistance is entirely contingent upon the provincial government and provincial contributions, will this minister now commit that he will provide all of the funds necessary to ensure that Albertans have access to the maximum amount available?
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to be able to respond to that question. I was worried on perhaps the last day of the session I might not have the opportunity of sharing some more good news with Albertans. But I would want to first of all say that yes, Mr. Speaker, that this government has put a high priority on helping our social allowance recipients to regain independence, and we see job retraining as being a very key part of that, Mr. Speaker. But I would also want to say that the solution isn't just job retraining, Mr. Speaker, but it's having the jobs available once people are retrained. And I would want to reiterate what the Acting Minister of Career Development has said as it relates to the initiatives that this government has taken during the last 3 years as it relates to diversification. And thanks to those initiatives, Mr. Speaker, we're seeing some tremendous indicators and tremendous good news for this province as it relates to a record number of jobs in this province, Mr. Speaker, unemployment the lowest it's been in 3 years, Mr. Speaker, a drastic reduction in our own caseload. I was encouraged, and I mentioned earlier in this week, Mr. Speaker, 1,300 fewer caseloads in the city of Calgary alone. Again, a clear result to the initiatives of this government as it relates to diversification. Mr. Speaker, we're doing the things in this province. We're taking the necessary steps to work with those people on social allowance and give them the job opportunities that they want.
Edmonton Goldbar, followed by Highwood, then Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, psychiatric nurses in this province are experiencing both a lack of understanding and appreciation from the provincial government in regard to the vital service their profession provides. And they provide it in a variety of settings, extended care, home care, and large institutions. Mr. Speaker, the undermining of this profession is inexcusable. The Psychiatric Nurses Association, Mr. Speaker, has received some written assurances from past ministers of the Department of Advanced Education that the future of this profession is safe, that it's not in jeopardy, but the drop in enrollment simply begs that question. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Advanced Education. Will the Minister now give the House a clear statement of his government's position regarding the future of the psychiatric nursing profession in the health care system in Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, my responsibilities as Minister of Advanced Education lie with the training of these professionals. We've had requests from Alberta Hospital Edmonton Board in view of the fact that graduates have decreased from 40 to 30 to just 13 in this past year, that consideration be given to perhaps terminating that program. Before any decision is reached on that matter, Mr. Speaker, discussions would certainly take place with the Psychiatric Association of Alberta.
Well, on that very point, Mr. Speaker, has the Minister undertaken to initiate or conduct a study to find out why that enrollment has dropped so dramatically while the one at Ponoka has risen? Have we had any study of the utilization of the profession?
Mr. Speaker, I would think perhaps that question should be directed to the user of the system, namely under the Minister of Health. This department has not conducted a study. The role of this department is to respond to the needs and desires put forward by the very people who do the training, namely Alberta Hospital Edmonton.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this department is in fact responsible for advanced education. It falls under it. Mr. Speaker, I think the Minister can answer this one. What progress is being made regarding the Bachelor of Psychiatric Nursing degree program, which the Association has been requesting from the department for years?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as Minister, I simply can't respond to that today because I do not know, but I will make a commitment to... I understand that, Honourable Member. I'm simply saying, as Minister, this morning, I do not know the answer to that question, but I do take as a commitment to determine the answer and inform the Honourable Member and members of the House.
Thank you. Member for Highwood, followed by Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, this government has made it possible for communities all across Alberta, whether in Fort Chipewyan in the north, Fort Macleod in the south, from Lloydminster in the east to Crow's Nest Pass in the west, to have access to financial support for communities' facilities, such as community halls, swimming pools, museums, and the like. This community facility enhancement program, Mr. Speaker, does not use tax dollars, but lottery funds, lottery dollars to help create, renovate, and sustain vital community facilities that are so important to the quality of life in Alberta today. My question, Mr. Speaker, is to the Minister of Public Works, Supply and Services. How has the money been expended in government constituencies and in non-government constituencies?
Mr. Speaker, Yesterday, I tabled in the Assembly, for the benefit of all members of the Assembly, a motion for return dated to August 8, 1988, with respect to all of the projects that have been approved under the Community Facility Enhancement Program. All members will recall that in the fall of 1988, when the Premier of the province of Alberta had the vision and the determination to create a new program that would protect the family and enhance community life, I think a lot of us were unsure exactly what the success ratio would be with this program, but I'm very, very pleased to say today, Mr. Speaker, that of all the programs that I've ever had the good fortune of being responsible for or part of, this visionary program enunciated by Premier Getty a year ago is certainly tops the list in that one. In terms of the information provided yesterday, Mr. Speaker, anybody who wanted to take a few minutes with a calculator would clearly indicate and know as a result of the documentation there that, as I recall, in the Legislative Assembly, there are 83 members of the Legislative Assembly, 59 are part of the government, the remainder fit two different opposition parties. If they were to take a look at the total dollars allocated, Mr. Speaker, that they would almost see that it's almost perfect in alignment in terms of the distribution of dollars, the government constituencies, non-government constituencies. And, Mr. Speaker, they continue to come. A few minutes ago, I just received such an application from a member in the House, not a government member, saying, hey, can you take a look at this and see what we can do with respect to it? I think the people of Alberta understand and appreciate, and of course with the plaques, the press releases, the news releases, the pictures in the paper, the big signs that are up, citizens of this province full well know what we're doing with respect to helping the family.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My first supplementary then is to the minister who is responsible for lotteries, major exhibitions and fairs. A truly fair-minded minister. Would the minister outline for us what is the role of the MLA in securing community facility enhancement funds for each member's constituency?
Oh, well, Mr. Speaker, this is really, really coincidental because there's no doubt at all about the fact that we do have a pamphlet called the Community Facility Enhancement Program. Talks the message from the Premier of the province of Alberta on the front cover.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Minister. That's good. Thank you. Now we'll have the next supplementary.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, my final supplementary is to the same minister. Would the minister please give this Assembly a breakdown on the typical types of projects supported by the Community Facility Enhancement Program?
Mr. Speaker, I can certainly do that. There's 686 in the document yesterday, but I want to point out, Mr. Speaker, the role of an MLA. The question was raised by a colleague of mine on the government side. I said that just recently I received such a request from a member of the opposition. I think all members should take the pamphlet talking about the community, making the family and the community life better, should take the pamphlet with the message from the Premier talking about this government's commitment. Give it to their constituents. And better yet, there's even a place for their card inside. And be as astute as the member from Jasper Place who was. He took the document, a government program, put his card in it, putting it out to his constituents. And let's do it so that we can hear positive comments like the ones we received from the member from West Loch Sturgeon, who's almost becoming a hero by piggybacking on the government program, Mr. Speaker.
Time for question period has expired. Point of order, Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, I repeat the point of order that has arisen previously based on standing orders, the very idea of question period, which is a genuine attempt to elicit information, and it is a complete misuse of the standing orders to instead attempt to elicit from ministers from their own backbenches mere announcements, touting, and general flim-flammery.
No, comments are duly noted, and the chair would point out, though, that sometimes that seems to apply not only to questions coming from one quarter of the House, And the difficulty, of course, in terms of question period is that the House itself slowed itself down so much today that we didn't get to our normal allotment of questions. And hopefully that will change when we next meet again. The Monday is quite fine by the chair. Quite fine. First off, there's a request under Standing Order 40, Edmonton Whiteman.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, under that particular section, I wish to introduce a motion that would see this House go on record as congratulating and wishing well the Edmonton team of the Little League Canadian Series, that team being Confederation Park. Mr. Speaker, just to speak to it very briefly, this particular team from the constituency of Whitemud is representing Alberta in this series. They've gone through the entire series undefeated, and in doing so, they've captured the hearts of all Edmontonians. They call it the Drive for Five because they've gone through 5 games without losing. If they win the championship game tomorrow, which I'm confident they are, that they will, then they go on to Pennsylvania to represent all of Canada in the World Series. I would ask that this House go on record to commend and congratulate the Confederation team and to wish them well in the game tomorrow and the future games that they'll be holding in Pennsylvania.
There's a request for unanimous consent on this particular urgent matter with regard to a congratulatory message. Those in favor of the urgency, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion carries. Speaking very, make the motion, please, honourable member.
What's that?
And then,
Mr. Speaker, I will move the motion as I previously read it out. I don't feel it's necessary to add any additional comment.
the honourable member, is there a call for the question? Order, please. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That'll be shown on the record, carried unanimously. Thank you. Order, please. I don't know if this is a mass walkout or what. May we revert briefly to the introduction of special guests? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure this morning to introduce a former colleague of mine in this legislature, the Honourable Andy Alberg, in his responsibilities for the government. Mr. Alberg was the member of the legislature from 1948 to 1971 for some 23 years. During that time, he achieved some very great successes of recognition. First of all, he was the first provincial treasurer to bring in $1 billion budget into the province of Alberta just prior to 1971. In his tenure as Minister of Education, he enhanced and was a great supporter and builder of the Alberta Teachers Association and the teaching profession in the province of Alberta, which he is to be noted. And I would have to say that after being elected 6 times and having retired very well, I think there's a bit of advice to myself and maybe others in this legislature that there is a good life after politics. I'd like Mr. Alberg to stand and be recognized by the legislature.
Orders of the day.